Hi guys, welcome back to Fake Fangs episode 4. Today's episode is called Mana-Hatta, and today I'll be taking a look into episode 4 of FX's What We Do in the Shadows, Manhattan nightclub. Let's have a little chit-chat. So, just to recap this episode, the vampires take a trip to Manhattan to try and gain allegiance with Simon the Devious, played by Nick Kroll, and his crew to attempt to expand their dominion over more than just their streets and Ashley Street, but things take an unexpected turn. So we're straight in the episode and we immediately get to see the outcome of Jenna's transformation. Her roommate is so sweet to take care of her, but there's something really disturbing about seeing Jenna just straight up dead and with that fly crawling on her eye. Ugh, I hate anything to do with touching eyes, so that really creeped me out when I first saw it. Although I mentioned before that they seem to be going with the interview with the vampire idea, they've seemed to put their own twist on things, and now there's some sort of purgatory of deadness before they actually become a fully fledged vampire. Of course, I'm always thinking of Guillermo here, and it makes me almost sad to think that this is something that he would have to go through to achieve his lifelong dream. I think it would be quite alarming to see him in that state, so I'm not sure how it will differ when it is his turn, but Jenna's transformation has made me nothing but excited to see the outcome. So this is the first episode 4 we have of the show, and episode 4s are famous to me for being so good, and possibly my favourite episodes of the show. This one is super important as it's the introduction of the bloody cursed hat and Simon the Devious, who I'd say is one of the most fan favourite returning characters. The past 3 episodes have been quite strong on exposition and establishing the main cast of characters and their relationships with each other, so this is the first episode where we really get to have some fun. It's nonsense and bonkers and fueled purely by this shit and fart humour that comes back time and time again. And I feel as if this is the first true shit and fart episode. There's not much addition to the overarching plot, and not much is achieved other than blowing up Simon's club. But it really helps with the world building and giving this background to the blood vampires. We get a quick insight into their life before America, and it adds this air of mystery to them, as although we know the vampires haven't always lived in Staten Island, but for them to speak about it really makes me wonder what their life was like before the show. Although I think having it posed as a documentary is a fantastic idea, I do sometimes mourn the fact that we can never have flashback moments to their days before the documentary existed. I think it leaves out something that would be so amazing to see, but for continuity's sake, obviously, it just wouldn't be possible. We need a moment here to talk about the witch hat. It's one of the more bizarre things we're introduced to in the show, and I'm just so intrigued by it. It's implied that it has magical properties because it's made from witch skin, but I want to know to what extent its powers can reach. A question that comes to mind is, does the hat have a stronger effect on other beings than it does on vampires? Laszlo has had that hat for a very long time, and in all the centuries he's possessed it, he's had many misfortunes, but nothing that he wasn't able to survive. There's then a scene where he has a new familiar called Jason, and the second Jason touches the hat, a bookshelf crushes him and he is dead. Laszlo was still holding the hat at this point, however, so is this just a further extent of Laszlo's curse? It also makes me wonder if the hat is somehow sentient. Is it able to choose its owner? Of course, there is this feud between Laszlo and Simon because Simon so desperately wants the hat from Laszlo, so comes up with his own devious plan to take it. But what's the reason? Of course, due to this show being a comedy, you can chalk it up to Simon just really likes the hat and he just really wants it for himself. But I like to think there's some bigger things at play. Maybe the hat itself, due to its cursed nature, somehow causes misfortune in the way of making somebody desperately want to keep the hat, but always finding yourself having it taken away from you, as, of course, we see straight after the club is blown up, Laszlo takes the hat right back from Simon. It's such an interesting idea, an interesting prop. Do I think for 1 second we're going to get an explanation into the lore of the hat? No, definitely not. This is the shit and fart show after all, but I think that's partly where the fun comes from, is getting to speculate and essentially come up with your own conclusion. Okay, so I've never fully taken full note of this before in my many rewatches of the show, but this time around I've noticed how lonely Nandor is from the very beginning. He talks about how he really wants to make new friends while at the club, and that this would be a great new opportunity to make new connections and meet new people. That main potential coming from his reconnection with Simon the Devious. It's almost heartbreaking to see that betrayal at the end of the episode and how Simon reveals he never intended to build bridges with them in the first place. I think this is also the reason he suddenly becomes so lax when he bumps into that guy who is trying to steal Guillermo and eat him. He just wants to please and be accommodating to the whims of other people at the club in the hope of appealing to somebody new. We sit back and we watch him in later episodes completely ruin his relationships with other people in his life, but I feel as if he's so blind to see the people who are present and stay loyal to him. It seems like he's addicted to meeting new people and the potential they could become, and it always seems to go one of two ways for him. Either they reach that potential he's built up around them in his mind, and then suddenly he's bored and they're thrown aside, or that person realizes that they don't actually like him and they try to get rid of him by any means. He is very much an acquired taste, but to those people who are accustomed, they are fiercely loyal. Of course, I'm talking about Guillermo again as the main example, but Laszlo, Nadia and Colin all seem to take him as he is. There's a gentle unity among them, and although they're all mismatched shapes, they fit each other and that seems to suit them all just fine. It's a shame that Nandor cannot see this and he's always running off for someone new. He's the only one in the group that's doing this, as the others seem quite content with their situation. It makes me wonder if there's something that he's running from, or if there's something unspoken that's forcing him to make these bad decisions in the company that he keeps. On to Nandor's apology. That's right, you heard me. Nandor apologizes in this episode. Our one and only apology from Nandor the Relentless. I think there's good opportunity to do some kind of character study here for Nandor and why this is the only time he apologizes in the show. Not only apologizes, but also makes it up to Guillermo for doing something shitty, and then, when he puts Guillermo into the hospital, feels the need to tell him he's his best friend? Sorry, what? Season 4 Nandor could never. But here's the thing. Why doesn't he apologize anymore? He clearly has the capabilities to see between right and wrongdoings, his most wrongdoings mainly towards Guillermo. So why is this the only time he apologizes for doing something bad? This isn't even the worst thing that he's done. We'll discuss specifics in later episodes, but although he may show glimmers of guilt towards those things he does do in later episodes, there's no showing of remorse. And why? We also see him do bad things specifically to Guillermo in the first 3 episodes, so why now, in episode 4, do we have an apology and a grand gesture from Nandor? My theory relates to the point I just made moments ago about those who are loyal to him. In this huge rejection from Simon the Devious and utter embarrassment it causes him, does this suddenly part the clouds in his mind that are cast over Guillermo's faithfulness? Does he suddenly recognize that actually he's been taking these things for granted and he should truly make amends lest this end the same way things did with Simon? 2 blows in one night would be quite hard to take for anyone, so I think he recognizes the action that needs to be taken, otherwise this may be a situation where he could lose Guillermo for good. I think this is the first real time that we get to see behind the scenes type stuff for familiars. I quickly want it noted that when Guillermo is walking down the hall to the familiar room and he sees the sign for the sex room and does that little wiggle with his glasses, it's possibly my most favourite scene ever. I have no idea if that was scripted or if that was improvised, but I adore it. It's possibly one of my top 10 Guillermo moments. But anyway, so we get to the familiar room and it's gross. It still really shocks me that this is how they're treated. I understand to an extent that humans are their food, so they would treat them in the same poor conditions that we treat our livestock, but I really can't seem to wrap my head around how they truly have abandoned their humanity. To reiterate what I mentioned in the first episode, they were all humans once, so surely they're fully aware that these conditions are awful. Or maybe they are aware, but just can't find it in themselves to care. Most likely the latter, but from here we can see the sort of network that familiars have. Of course, if they're all forced into a small enclosed space together for hours at a time, then it makes sense that they have a sort of community with each other. I mean, who else would they be able to share these details of their life with? I really like the fact that Colby says to Guillermo, "Don't you read the newsletter?" Oh, it's such a brilliant line. I feel like it brings such depth. There's a newsletter. So there's other familiars in the area that need to be kept updated about certain news within the familiars world. I may be getting ahead of myself, but I like to imagine that there's some kind of formal meetings because if you think about it, there would be quite a lot of gossip going on. Possibly a lot of things other smaller groups of familiars would talk about and possibly agree upon that may need to be shared with the others. So, from this small scene, there's a real sense of community among them, and maybe so far as to say a support network, as who else would understand the lengths some of these familiars may have to go to for their masters? Here we are again at the end of the episode. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed episode 4 of Fake Fangs. If you did, then please follow me on Instagram at fakefangs_ for more behind the scenes content and to be notified of new uploads. And once again, thank you to my editor, Becky Gray, who you can also find on Instagram at Becky Gray Music Arts. I hope you guys have a great day and I'll see you next time.